For years, I've been kind of interested in Model Ts, and it kind of goes way back when I was a kid on the farm. My dad bought one for making a thing to run the elevator, to run the corn up on the thing. He was going to take a Model T, take the rear wheel off, and put a pulley on it. And I played with it when I was about 7 years old. Then when I got married, came back from the Army, I still had the desire to have a Model T. My wife was making a whole $200 a month. And so I had the audacity to waste $10 of her money and buy a Model T, which she's never forgiven me for. Bought and sold several of them over the years and ended up moving several times when I was with the Bureau, and each time I'd sell the Model Ts off and buy another one when I get settled somewhere. When I retired from the Bureau, took an early retirement, came with John Deere in '79, I started collecting cars again, as I always did. Finally I had 2 minutes. When I got here in '79, I decided I'd start collecting again. Well, then I started collecting more of the early ones, and you'll see from here the brass era is the only ones I collect. And Ford used brass on his cars up until 1916, and so you kind of hear the brass era versus the black era, and so I kind of stopped collecting at the 16 level, because you got to stop somewhere. And so the bottom line is, I had more than I had stuffed here and stuffed there, and finally I decided I'd build a building, and then as anything else happens, before long you have the building and you have to fill it up. So over the years I kept collecting, and pretty soon the cars start finding me, and so now I've ended up having 25 of them in there. I really don't want my wife to know how many I do have. She is a special ed teacher and has trouble getting beyond 10, so that's what I've convinced her that I've got. She hates the place with a passion, and so she never comes down there, and the only way I can keep her out of there is if she shows up. I hand her a rag when she comes in and says, "Honey, could I get you to polish some of the brass on the lights?" And she's out of there, so we never have my wife down there to see any of the cars. But it's amazing how you can become a millionaire collecting these things. You start out with 2 million, and pretty soon you only have 1 million. And the joy of these cars that you will see, it costs about $60,000 to restore one, and then you can take it to shows and haul them all over the country to shows, and lo and behold, before long, you'll start winning some prizes, and you end up with a $60,000 restoration job, and you get some $10 trophies that you can set up on the shelves. It's a real money-making thing. What I have is a building that kind of resembles a 1915 Model T dealership. It really wasn't planned that way, but that's kind of how the thing has ended up. I had them build a shell, and then I finished off everything inside myself because I couldn't afford to have somebody else do it. But this is the front part of it. And everything, when you walk in there, you'll have to realize everything in that building somebody threw away, except for one piece of furniture. All the rest of the furniture, everything in there, I'm a kind of a cheap ass, and so I didn't want to spend any money. So I gathered it up out of dumpsters and here and there. Like the light fixtures in the back are out of the dumpster. They came out of the Village and Pancake House, and the one chandelier came out of the Bishop's Cafeteria in Bettendorf. Another one in front there is a satellite dish that I found laying along John Deere Road, and turned it upside down and hung a chandelier from that. And all the furniture was stuff that people were going to throw away. So I'm kind of the recycling center for Moline of junk. So that's what you're going to see. The Model T is kind of an interesting car, and I guess it really kind of fits with my background. I'm an old farm boy from North Iowa, didn't have any money, and very similar to Henry Ford, who grew up with a very meager background, and I guess he was kind of lazy like I was. He tried to figure out better ways of doing things without putting much effort into it, and he kind of designed this thing called a car. He and his wife made it, and it's called a quadricycle, and they got the engine started on their kitchen table in Dearborn, and from that he kind of parlayed it into a kind of a car business. Well, most people don't realize that Ford started out a company called Henry Ford Company. And after a few years, he made a car that was attractive to some other people and investors, and they came along and bought that company from him, the Henry Ford Company, and that was a company called Cadillac. And so they bought the Henry Ford's first car and all the patents, and that became the Cadillac. Well, he started another company called the Ford Motor Company, started making the same car again, And from that, it's growing into the business that you see today. But the Model A is the first car that he had. It was made in 1903, and most people don't realize that Henry made 10 different models of cars before he made the Model T. He made a Model A, an AC, a B, a C, an E, F, K, N, R, and S. All of those cars were made prior to the Model T coming along. So this is a Model A. It was made in 1903. It was the first production car. Also called an A. It's 2-seat, or it could be 1-seat. It's got an engine underneath the front seat, and it's in the center of my floor out there. Little bit of a car. Then he made a C, and there was a big dispute always between he and his investors as to whether the market was for big cars or little cars. And he kept saying, no, I want to make little cars for the masses, and the investor said, no, you got to make big cars. And so he would make little cars, and they demanded he make big cars. And so he made a K, which was a monstrous touring car, 6-cylinder. He made a B, that was a big car. But he kept going back to these little cars that he kept wanting to do. Finally, in about 1914, he had such a falling out with everybody that he said, to heck with you. And he bought everybody out and became a sole owner of the Ford Motor Company. And so, but back then you had a lot of the investors were people that you know, like the Dodge brothers were big contributors to Henry Ford. And a lot of my cars, the parts were made by Dodge brothers, and you have DB on them or Dodge brothers stamped right on them. And then like in 14, he had a big falling out, and they all went their own way. So the first year for the Model T is technically 9. Some people call 8. He started making the Model T in October 1 of 1908, but it's called actually 9. His production year runs from October 1 until September 30. And so a 9 car, there was 7,728 of them made. They cost about $850 a piece. And that's one of mine there. It's bright red. And I'm sure a lot of times you people have all heard about, well, you can have any color model you want as long as it's black. That's not true. The first Model Ts, the 9s were, the tourings were red, and the little roadsters were gray. And at about 2800 serial number, he took and changed to dark green. And he went the rest of 9 and all of 10 with dark green. In 11, he promptly moved to dark blue and kept dark blue through 11, 12, and 13. And then in 14, he started the moving assembly line, and he found that Japanese enamel dried faster than blue, so that's when he went to the all black. And that's when you hear the adage, well, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. 14 is when he actually started the moving assembly line. And prior to that, it's kind of interesting, what he did in the plant that he built, most of the early ones, was in the Pequot plant. He had an assigned spot on the floor where 4 guys were assigned, and they would have 4 people carrying in parts to that spot. And they would assemble the car by hand, and then they'd roll it out and bring some more parts in. And it wasn't until Ford visited a packing house in Chicago that he got the idea, if they take cogs apart going down a line, can I put cars together by just doing the reverse process? And that's where he got the idea for the moving assembly line. It was done in phases. It wasn't just like overnight. But so all of the cars that I have primarily are made by hand, and I can still go to the archives in Dearborn and get the build tickets of those cars, and they'll tell me the exact day that car was made, what parts went on it, because Ford wasn't a real big manufacturer of parts in early days. He bought most of his parts from outside suppliers, and they'll tell me the guys who assembled that car will sign their names to this build ticket. Then I've got the shipping records of where all those cars went. So it's kind of interesting to be able to go back and look, and I can show you some of those if you want to see them when you get to my building. And that kind of brings up another story too that was involved in Henry. Henry was one of many manufacturers. As you know, most all of you know, there was about 5,000 manufacturers of cars, and I think it all stemmed from people having carriage building in their towns, and they stuck a motor on the thing and called it a car. So there was tons and tons of cars made. I think I've heard various numbers, but I think there were something like 25 or 30 cars manufactured just in Illinois or in Moline area. Chuck Hoagland used to give talks on that and show you all of those cars that were made here. But Henry was in the mill of making cars, and a guy by the name of Sedan, if sometime you want to look up the history on this crazy story, there was a guy by the name of Sedan that patented the name automobile. And he put out a letter saying, if you're going to make a car, you've got to get a $5 permit from me to sell my cars. For each car, you have to pay me $5, because I own the patent on the term automobile. Well, Henry said, okay, I want to be a licensed Sedan manufacturer. Seldon said, Henry, you don't make cars, you just assemble cars. You buy all these parts from everybody else, you don't make cars, so they wouldn't license him. So Henry and he went into a big dispute over that, and that thing drug on for years and years. And finally the court ruled, now wait a minute, you can't patent the name automobile, because by then it was such a common number or name. And secondly, held him, you never made a car. How did you patent something you never made? So that story it goes way back to Henry Ford and Martin Seldon. Now here's another car that I have there. It's kind of unique. I don't know where Henry got such a fancy name for being an old farm boy, but he assigned the name to this as a Landaulet. That's a French name for something, I guess. I'm not in it. But it's a taxi cab. He only made them in 9. And it's kind of interesting. The poor old driver, he has to sit outside. And this is the green that he went to after he went to the red. This car came out of California. It was in a horrible shape, and I had to restore it. And the interesting thing of this is the back part there opens up like a baby carriage. It lays down and opens up, so you have an open background there. And that leather on that is elk hide. Not cow hide or anything. Elk hide is very soft, I found, in doing my research. And so I tried going to various places to find where I could get elk hide, and I couldn't find anybody that would sell me the elk hide the way I wanted it. So I finally found an elk farm up in Charles City, Iowa. I went there, and they do butcher their elk periodically, they said. But they can't butcher the elk in Iowa and sell the meat, so they have to haul the elk to Wyoming or Illinois to have them slaughtered. Then they can bring the meat back and sell it in Iowa. So we found 6 volunteer elk that took a ride one day in a trailer. We brought them over here to DeKalb, Illinois, and they shot them, skinned them, gave me the hides. I put them in a garbage can with ice and salt water and drove them to Boone, where there's a tannery. We processed them, then we had to ship them up to Wisconsin to have them plain the thickness I want, then back to Boone to get them dyed black and waterproofed, and then I could bring them over here and have my upholsterer put them on my car. So that's the inside of the taxi cab. I don't know how big people had to be, but they had to be mighty small to fit in there with 4 people. And on top of that, when you get to the building, take a look at the space between the steering wheel and the seat. I can't get my fat rear end underneath it to drive them. And the people had to be very small. I've got some period pictures, and the people that were driving them looked like they're maybe about 5'6", like jockeys. Go ahead. On this one here, this is a taxi cab, and so it's got a matching clock for the speedometer, which is on the other side. The next one you're going to see here is a 1910 coupe. By the way, some of these that I have are very unique in the fact that there's only known to be in existence 2 of those Landaulets left in the country, one in New Jersey and mine. This is a coupe, and this is kind of an interesting one. It's sometimes they call them a doctor's coupe, and the literature that I've found says, why drive an open car in the wintertime for $125? We'll sell you a coupe body. You take your touring body off, set the coupe body on, there's 6 bolts holds it on, and you've got a car that you can do that. So this is a 1910 coupe. There were made, what was there made, Bud? I think you got the numbers there. They had 187 of these made. There's 3 of these left that I know of somewhere in the country. Look at the prices on these. What was the price on that? $1,000 on that touring car, that Landaulet. That's $1,200. Back then, Henry paid his help $2.50 a day, not an hour, a day. And you can imagine how long it would take you to pay for a car like that and still feed your family. So that's a coupe. I have one of them in the building. This is a Tourabout, the 1910 Tourabout. Ford made a Roadster And then people wanted to be able to haul an extra person, so he just took the front seat section, duplicated it, and set it on the pedestal on the back, which is like where the pedestal would set for a mother-in-law roadster, changed the top. And so they only made this one year. This is a 1910 Tourabout, they call it. This is a standard 1910 Touring, sold for $950. That's the green. That green's a little off. When I first did that one, I was having trouble really identifying what is the correct color. And this green I found is a little lighter than it should be. This is serial number 21987. Ford serial numbered his cars just sequentially. Started at 1 and went up to 15 million. So the serial number on the engine is everything for a Model T. You know, if you have a Model T and it does not have the correct serial number, you don't have a legitimate thing. So the engines are extremely hard to find because they are all interchangeable. But if you have the wrong serial number, you really do throw the value of your car off. Another one, if you want, bud. This is another standard Touring. This is a town car. This is a chauffeur-driven limousine that Ford made. They made, what did I show there, bud? 315 of these. There's 3 of these left. There's one in Reno, Nevada, one in Springfield, Missouri, and mine. And it's designed for a chauffeur-driven limousine to set up front. The back end opens up again like the Landaulet, and so you have an open back end, and the cockpit is closed. They have side curtains on it. And again, the room between the steering wheel and everything, Ford tried to make the room inside big enough so you could get 4 people in that little compartment in the back. So he moved the seat forward and took the space away from the driver. So this is a very, very valuable and very interesting car. 11 Tourings. We're starting to now get into a little more higher production. Look at there, 26,000 of these made. Prices coming down, $780. Standard Touring car. Leather seats. By the way, for those who are interested, this thing on the side that you will see is called a carbide tank. And what you do is you put water up here and carbide powder down there, the stuff they used to make acetylene out of, or miner's lamps. And you turn the little valve on here, and it drips water on. You've got to get 65 drips of water per minute to create enough gas to go down through this hose, come up to here, and that creates the headlights. The side lights are made out of kerosene. They're fired up with kerosene. So the bottom line is, they used acetylene up until 1915. But that's what that tank is on the side. Another Touring. I have some of my books at home that are laying in the cars, and feel free to grab them. They're photo albums, and you show what the cars look like. Some of them look god-awful when I start. You can really make chicken salad out of chicken manure. This is a Torpedo. Ford tried in 1911 to appeal to his younger market by creating a car that was really a sporty-looking model. But it went against the grain and everything Ford would have ever tried to do. He tried to make everything standardized with his cars, so that, and again, that was very much in vogue back there. If you could make every car that you could move all the parts around rather than customize them. He wanted to have a car that was totally unique, and so he called this a Torpedo. Only made it in 1911. Everything on this car is abnormal. The frame is different. The only thing that's the same is the motor, front and rear axle, but all the rest of it is different. The hood, the horn, the steering column, the fenders, frame, everything is different on that car. He only did it 1 year, and they're very, very rare. This is an original 11 that I bought out of a dealership in Michigan City, Indiana. It was in the basement. It's never been touched, and I just put it there in the corner of my building, and a lot of people come to look at that because if we're restoring, it gives you exactly ideal how many pleats were in the seats, where the little fasteners all went, what everything was. So I kind of just leave that there. Old Charlie there, he's been around the world. He came out of the Knox Berry farm. He was one of their dummies they had, and the guy bought him and was selling them here at the motorcycle swap meet, so I bought him and put him in there. So we got Charlie sitting in there. 12 is starting to get a little more modernistic. There, if you notice when you go out to my building, when you look at them, my golly, the fanciness, the brass and the pinstriping and everything on the early ones. And Ford's objective was to try to get that cost down and reduce the cost so people could afford them. There we're now down, instead of $1,200 a car, now we're down to $780. He made 26,000 of the 12s. This one here is a 12 standard one. And this is the first year that he put enclosures on the front so people couldn't fall out. They're removable panels. One side's a door, the other one's just a panel. I always say OSHA probably got in his case about people falling out of their cars. But he put them on there, and that's the 12 standard, what they call smooth side touring. He carried the name Torpedo forward one more year, but he changed it completely from the name Torpedo that was made in 11. The 12 has got standard fenders on it, standard frame, standard everything, except for the body and the stuff was somewhat unique. That's a picture inside my building, but you can see it's still got the gas tank, but it has a little trunk on the back of it, and he called it a Torpedo, and that was the last of. This is serial number 99,231. Cost on this, I don't know, we didn't have it. In 1912, Henry tried to break into the market for
$590.
okay, $590. The cost is coming down. Just watch those numbers. He just keeps bringing the money costs down. He finally got him down to $275 a car in 1917 or 1919. In 12, he thought he could maybe break into the commercial market. So in July, he introduced a thing called a delivery car, thinking that he could sell them to people that delivered goods in town. Can you imagine these big cities with all the horse manure and urine that's on the streets? And so he comes up with this thing here. This is the exact color that it was. He made 1,800 of them, I believe. He sold them as commercial vehicles, and he even put out a booklet, which I have in that car, that tells you the cost comparison of maintaining 2 horses and a wagon and the oats and the manure removal and the hay versus having a Model T with the gasoline and where you don't have to use it all the time. The horses are going to keep eating the Model T. But that didn't sell. He ended up making 1,800 of them, didn't sell. He finally just did everything to clear out his inventory. He quit making them in July of 12. That was it. Here's a farm roadster. This is kind of an interesting one. I don't have the exact number of it. It's unique in the fact that it's kind of the end of the production, but it's got a little thing on the back here. This little box, you can take that whole thing off and slip a pickup box on it, or you can take and use this and leave this railing, or you can take and change this and put a seat back there. And they call them a mother-in-law roadster if you have the single seat on it. I've got a mother-in-law roadster, but this is called a farm roadster. Yeah, there's the mother-in-law roadster. $590 now. We're really getting down there. And there's your little mother-in-law seat back in the back end there. Got a little handrail, but no seat belts. Kind of interesting. 13 is the last year for the leather seats, last year for the blue. And this car here is kind of interesting. An FBI friend of mine from Washington, D.C., when he came out here, he said his dad had a Model T that he bought that was in the building where they built the J. Edgar Hoover building, and he'd taken it out of that building before they tore it down, took it out to his mother's garage in Baltimore, Maryland. So he and I got together finally, and I went out and bought it, and his dad had torn this car completely apart. It was, even the panels on the bodies were all taken apart. And so I brought it back here, restored it. And this is a 1913. This car has been judged 4 different times. It shows it's a senior Grand National Award winner, which means that I've spent a fortune on it, and I've got 4 $10 trophies now. Interesting thing in this one is it's got the original 1913's license plate on the front. Notice that? That's so the wind can blow through it. The back one is solid, but that's 13, and then on the side it says 13ILL. This thing was kind of done as a joke because we have a little bit of politics in our AACA. And we had a judge that kind of took issue with Chuck Hoagland's knowledge, which he was absolutely right, that some guy who tried to show a car that it wasn't a legitimate Model T. And Chuck took it an issue because he was judging it. Well, the next time they had a show here, and the issue was you can show any car you want as long as you can show that it came from the factory that way. Well, Chuck was 100% right, but when we had a show here, then they made an issue with Chuck couldn't be the judge because he took issue with it at another show. So, just for ornering us, I put this thing together. Ford sold 116 chassis like that, and they came out of the factory that way, and so I put this thing together and entered it at an AACA show. And you can imagine the politics and all of these board of members who are a little bit snooty saying, how are we going to judge this thing? And I just stood back and let them argue. Finally, they agreed. He's got the documentation to show that that's how that thing came from the factory. So they judged it, and I won National First Junior. I took it to another show, won National Senior with it, and I just won Senior or Grand National Award with this crazy thing. But it's done. It was a total joke. 15, interesting sidelight thing on this one. We're now getting away from gas lights. This is the first year for the electric lights. They were magneto lights, and the faster you drove, the brighter your lights got. You go around a corner and the lights dim way down, so you lose your, going down the road real fast and you burn the light bulbs out. So it was really not too practical. But look at our cost on the Model T, $440 for this thing. This is the first year for the all black. And he started to really cheapen things up a little bit too. He's still got the brass radiator, but he's got, instead of brass lights here, and he's got little brass rings around that. And the Naga hides for the seats are coming in. No leather anymore. But everything is still chugging along. There's a 15 Touring. This one came from Moline. Maybe you remember him. Nelson, can't remember what his first name was. Yeah. He was a big license plate collector out there. So you remember him?
Jim Nelson.
What was his first name?
Jim.
Jim, yeah, Jim Nelson. This was his. It was in a barn. And a good friend of mine who was here saw this car. I drug it out of the basement. It was all in pieces. And I said, I think I can restore that car in 2 months and have it ready for the show. And Mr. Shear said, I doubt that, and I wrote it on the wall. And in 60 days, I took that car from a pile and completely restored it, showed it, and won Grand National, or National First Place with it. So you can tear in these things and get them done fast. Pretty simple. It's getting pretty basic when you get that. Now we're getting down to just transportation for the Model Ts. This is the first year for the Sedan. He made them in 15, but they didn't work out. They quit making them right away. The Sedan was first introduced in 15, but he quit making them. This is the first real production 1916 Sedan. It's the last year for the brass radiators, so that's where my collecting stops. And if you get out and take a look at it, it's kind of in the middle of my floor. It's like a stagecoach. You got to open up the side door, jump over the seats to get into the to where you can sit in the driver's seat or the passenger seat. It's a very interesting car, very heavy. I know people have tried to drive these things, go around the corner, and they tip over because they are very, very top heavy. This is one of the oddball cars. This is a car that I purchased as it is right now from a fellow here in town, Leo Gannon, who owned Gannon's Plumbing. He passed away and his wife wanted to get rid of the car, so I bought it with the idea that I would probably just resell it because I don't collect this kind. And then my granddaughter saw it. She says, Grandpa, I love that car. Can I have it? And I said, sure. She's only 8 years old. Well, she's now 20. She still claims that's her car, so I'm afraid that's going to be here for a while. Then you get down to some cars that are just absolutely can't be saved. This one here, deceased in 1942. I have it on my cemetery behind my building. It died. It's rest in peace. It's got a head stone there, and our minister came and performed last rites on it, so it's dead. Any more?
That's it.
That's it, folks. I hope that you enjoyed that, and you're certainly welcome to come out to the building and look at it. Is there any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, the one with the mother-in-law seat?
Yeah.
Did that come with a silencer?
With a what?
The car with the mother-in-law seat, did it come with a silencer?
Well, I don't know. If you go around the corner, you can put her, shut her up real quick. You had a question?
Well, I heard that parts came in on pallets, and he wanted to use the wood of the pallet.
Very much so. True story. Yeah, he specified the size of the box so we can take it apart and make the floorboards. Yes?
What's the status of your 1910 you're working on it out of Peoria, down in Peoria?
Well, I'm working on one. I bought a car down in Peoria, and I was telling a friend of mine about it. And I bought this car, and he said, yeah, I know that car. He said, I was pheasant hunting one time, and I looked through a barn window, and there was a barn down there that's got a car inside, just north of town. I said, no, that's not the one I'm thinking of. That's not the one I bought. And he said, well, there's one of them. So he gave me the directions, like he said, oh, it's 20 years before. He said, let's see, you go south, and then you turn it, no, you go further, and then you turn at the bridge, one of those kind of directions. Finally, I found the barn, knocked on the door, and said, is there a car in there? And the guy said, really strange look. He said, who told you about that? And I gave him Phil Fisher's name. He said, I don't know any Phil Fisher. I said, well, is there a car in there? He said, yeah, but I don't want anybody to know about it. I said, what's the deal? And he said, my father bought that car new in 1910, drove it 5 years, put it in the barn up on blocks, and it's never moved. And it's still there. And I'm hoping in the next month or so to get it bought. Everybody's dead, except the wife and I'm going to try to buy it. I thought at one time of trying to make a movie. I've restored it from start to finish, but I kind of given up on that idea. I'm going to just probably buy it and restore it and throw it in the collection. My goal in life is to have enough stuff so that I have a 2-day estate sale. And they'll serve my wife right. Anybody else have a question? Yeah.
Can you go through the process of starting it with the crank and the advance of the...
Model T, you will see, has got 3 pedals. And when you look at it, you wonder, how in the heck those work? There's 3 pedals underneath the steering column. This pedal over here, and it's got a hand lever. You put the lever halfway forward, step down on that pedal, and you keep pushing harder and harder and harder, and the car will go faster and faster and faster, and you got your speed control, your throttle up here on the side. And you get it going about as fast as you want it to go in low. Then you kick the lever forward, slow the car down RPM, let up on the pedal, and the thing will go into high. And then you get to go, you can get about 40 miles an hour out of it. When you want to stop, you pull the lever halfway back, the thing will come to a stop. Your pedal on your far right is the brake. And there's no brakes on the wheels or on the transmission. They're tightening around a planetary transmission to stop the thing. And then if you want to go backward, you step on the middle pedal and you go backwards. So you got to take an Arthur Murray dance lesson before you can drive a Model T. To start it, you got a thing on the side, on the left side, that's your spark advance. You have to put the spark way up, and then you typically what you want to do with a Model T is not turn the ignition on, crank them over several times to get a little compression build up, turn the switch on, give them a crank or two, and she should start up. You advance the spark, run the throttle, so it's got cruise control here, and it's a kind of a, and if you don't do it right, you'll break your arm. I mean, if you don't advance the spark, it will kick and it'll break your arm. It'll whack you right there. Yes?
Are those all hand crank?
All except for the Model A. Yeah. They didn't put a starter on until 1919.
They like to kick back.
Yes, they will kick. They will break your arm.
You don't crank.
Huh?
If you don't hold the crank right there.
Yeah, and you always crank with your hand, with your thumb here, and never go around. You always just go straight up, like this. Or else they will kick and they will break your arm. Yes?
True that the heaters were usually a rock that sat by the window.
Probably. They did have some heating methods. They had a thing where you could take and your exhaust pipe would come down underneath the rear, you could put a thing on it, run it up and over, and have kind of like a radiator, and then back down again and out the tailpipe. So you had this little radiator in the back seat to kind of keep it warm. But that's about the best they could do for heat. Any other questions? Again, you're welcome to come out to the building. Just park on the south side there and come in the front door and make yourself to home. You can do whatever you want. Take pictures. If you touch the brass, I'll just have you help me polish it when we get done. Thank you so much. I hope you found this interesting.